whenever I like to get deep, and I when I'm in person, you might not be able to speak as low and silent as I am, but I can just get closer to the mic, just like this. But I hope the audience isn't uncomfortable with how I've just gone about doing that.
No, they just got more relaxed.
Okay. Oh, good. ASMR podcast now.
This is the pilot episode. This is the first episode of the Spoiled Onions.
Spoiled Onions?
The Spoiled Onions film review.
Spoiled Onions.
Title pending.
Funny.
I don't know. But yeah, so my name is Joseph. I am a lover of film, and apparently now an official podcaster, studying animation and hopefully, making some short films of my own. And then this is Brandon. Say hello, Brandon.
Hey guys, I'm Brandon. I think film is okay. It's okay. I'm not really into it that much. I am an aspiring filmmaker. Hopefully things pick up, and maybe you'll even hear about it later on in this show. And right now I'm studying to become an online educator.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's me.
Ooh, love it. Well, you're educating people
just
right
a
now.
couple of cards.
I said you're educating people right now with this podcast.
That's right. I am telling you how to think when it comes to Tenet. Thank you for watching the Spoiled Onions show.
We should get someone with like a British accent to do that, like our intro, because I always love like podcasts like that. You probably do it better than me, but I love that accent on it. It's awesome.
That sounds a little scary.
You don't like it?
I can already imagine. Spoiled Onions. The Spoiled Onions show. Hey, we're going to be talking about Tenet. The Spoiled Onion.
Okay, not
well,
that.
now that I'm saying it, it's actually growing on me. Tell us, Joseph, what are we talking about today? What movie are we talking about today?
All I have for you is a word. Tenet. It'll open the right doors. Some of the wrong ones, too. Use it carefully.
Tenet.
Yep.
Tenet is the name of the film. A lot of people, for some reason, have not liked it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's the word on the street. It is vastly underperformed in the domestic box office. Though apparently internationally, it's doing really well.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the criticisms that I've heard from it is coming from you, because I've heard a lot of positives too, and of course there's my own personal experience with the film, which we saw a few weeks ago. But
well, let's start with the synopsis. If you want to go ahead and give us like a rundown of the story, a little more detail than like a Wikipedia post. But...
Okay, I'll try, because just like the synopsis, if you were to Google it, which I did before seeing the film, it tells you a good amount. I would admit pretty broad and decent without telling you anything at all. And if we were to try to explain every last bit of the plot of this film, it would probably just take the length of the film, maybe even longer, to get into the deeper details. But most importantly, we follow this protagonist, if you will, who seems to be like a spy. I guess that's essentially what he is. For the American, I didn't know if it was American or British government, but I don't hear a British accent, so I'm gonna have to assume American government. And we just are thrown right into it at the beginning. And he was, frankly, well, here's the thing about this film is that a lot of things happen, and Christopher Nolan does not give you much to work with. He lets you he lets you figure it out as you go. He almost respects your intelligence in that sense, for where it's like, I'm not just gonna throw it in your face. You have to figure it out as it comes too. So oftentimes you're just sitting there in the seat as these things play out, figuring out as you go. And just like with the opening scene, the opera act area, he's taking somebody, he's taking them away, and frankly, I do not understand any context as to what in the world was going on there. All that I know that matters is that led to the point in which he qualified himself to being worthy of being a part of the Tenet program, if you will, which is, I guess, the most significant aspect of that entire scene. The main character, by the way, I thought I was having a problem. I was like, do I have ADD or something like that? Because I don't even remember these characters' name. I don't remember the protagonist's name. It turns out, when I go ahead and I look up in the cast what the name of these characters are, the main character, played by John Washington, does not have a name. It's just simply referred to as the protagonist, and it makes sense as you go through the film and its plot, which is well, Joseph, what would you say? What would you say this plot goes to after he figures out about this Tenet program?
Yeah, so basically, he has that experience at the beginning, and I guess we should add that this is spoiler heavy territory. We're not going to hold anything back. So I forgot to put that in the beginning, but yeah, if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want to be spoiled, this is not the place for you.
Yeah, I don't even know if anything I said so far even says anything about what this movie truly entails.
Yeah, I think you're good.
Okay, good.
But yeah, so after that opening sequence, he has the part where he is basically tortured, and he commits suicide, so to speak, with what we assume is arsenic, but it's
Something
instead
like
a sleeping pill or a induced coma pill,
something
I guess,
like
if you will.
Yeah.
So not to get too lost in the weeds, he's recruited by Tenet, which they explain as a future organization that is trying to stop some sort of force that is trying to destroy the past. So the future is both trying to destroy the past and trying to prevent the past from being destroyed. He's recruited by the latter of those two entities.
Yes. Yeah, and it's very interesting because that essentially is what this plot and the narrative is going about the conflicts with that kind of environment of future forces interacting with the forces of the past. It really does go back and forth, which is why it's very hard to explain the plot because it's not linear in that fashion. You know, it's other aspects that you don't even figure out, things you're figuring out to the very end of the film. About how these things are interconnected. It's not easy to talk about to somebody who hasn't seen this film. And that's why, like, even if we were to discuss spoilers, right, other than the consequential things to the main characters, the events that are taking place are not easy to talk about. But that just goes into the intelligence of the writing that Christopher Nolan does. It's like he's not what's the word? Pulling any punches? Is that even the right word? He's not treating you like you're an idiot. He's going to expect you to put some mental effort into the process of understanding the story, but I think it has its rewards.
Yeah, right. He's not coddling the audiences. Yeah. The audience. He's not hand-holding them as much as some films try to do.
Yeah.
But anyway, let me finish up this synopsis really quick just to get everyone on the same page. Yeah. So he's recruited, James Bond style. We get the whole intro rundown. I guess it's a rundown. It's lacking a lot of info, which is part of the confusion for some people, intrigue for others. But yeah, he's basically working for Tenet. He ends up going to Mumbai to learn more about what is explained as inverted materials, which is basically things like bullet shells. Their entropy is reversed, which, by the way, I thought was a really cool way of describing time travel. So basically, instead of what the law of entropy says is decaying, matter getting worse, energy getting more chaotic, they go in the reverse order, and therefore that's why it looks like it's traveling back in time. So after he meets with the scientists, he goes to Mumbai because he found out that some of the material was originated there. They send him to Russia, where he meets the antagonist, if you will. And I don't remember. Do you remember his name? I should know this.
Well, I have it on the screen now. I think it's Andrei Sator.
Yeah.
Andrei?
Yeah. That sounds right.
Something like that.
Played by Kenneth Branagh. Pretty well, I say. Yeah. But
he made me not like him.
That's fair. I guess that's the point.
Yeah.
And then he meets his wife as well. That's how he gets to him. And not to drag this on too much, because I think we'll get more into main story plot points later. But Sator, if you will, is the link between the future that's trying to destroy the past, because they need some way to get materials back there and basically originate this, what's going to be some kind of major time reversal that's going to destroy the world. And then John David Washington's protagonist, if you will, spends the rest of the movie both trying to help his wife escape the abusiveness of that marriage, as well as trying to stop him from destroying the world, basically. And so that's the second half of the movie sees that plot carried out. until eventually the end of the movie is the ultimate save the day. The bad guy's dead. The girl lives happily ever after, and he walks away James Bond style and ends up killing people. And there you go.
That's
so. Yeah, that is a broad overview.
Very
of a very
broad,
complicated story.
I cannot even imagine. Like I said, because even if you haven't seen the film, hearing something like that doesn't even give you a scale as to how much is going on every scene. I mean, even as we're watching it and we're missing plot points because it's not slowing down. It's just moving.
True.
But I love it in that sense too. Is that you can watch it again and get more out of it, understand more details that you were missing out before. And I'll be entirely honest, there are some aspects that I am missing out on, but it's not really the overarching plot details. It'll be something like, what was going on with that painting at the beginning? I missed a line of dialogue, and I completely am now lost. And now I'm having to sit here and pretend as if I know what's going on. I'm like, oh, thank goodness, a fight scene. Okay, I can enjoy this. I know where we are, right? And luckily, I was able to get back on track as to what was going on after the fact. But yeah, that's Tenet for you.
Well, and that's the thing with Nolan too. I feel like there's two types of ways to approach rewatchability in films, and one is like the Fast and Furious action. Oh, this makes me feel good because people are smashing into things, and I can eat more popcorn while I'm watching this. You know, that kind of pure entertainment, not as much story focus.
I hate to call it dumb fun. I'm not saying it's dumb, but it's just like, look at the spectacle. The spectacle. That's what I'll call it. The spectacle.
I trashed the Fast and Furious films in front of someone one time, and he goes, I actually like those films.
Oh yeah.
I felt kind of bad.
Hey, I have those guilty pleasures too, and sometimes, you know, there's a whole culture of people who just like bad movies. You know, there's always some sort of like diamond in the rough. Yes, like The Room. I get pleasure out of it, but it's usually because it's comedic, right? An unintended purpose. Well, as you know, just action, nonsense action is just for the sake of, I guess it really is the visual and adrenaline that goes on with it. But this is a very much, although it has its moments, obviously, especially towards the end, it has its adrenaline-filled moments. It's very much narrative and concept-based, kind of like Inception in that way. That it's the concepts that are really driving your mind to be entertained by the plot. It's very interesting,
right? And piggybacking off of that, that's basically the other side of the coin. And let me make it clear: there's nothing wrong with movies for entertainment. That's really why they were invented, anyway.
Yes.
And I do enjoy sometimes just like letting my mind rest and watching like The Office or something like that.
Yes, right, exactly.
But specifically, the other side of that coin is what Nolan crafts, and it's a film that is rewatchable simply because you might not have understood it the first time around.
Right.
Which is I think is great because it's exciting to rewatch a movie to understand it. I don't know. Me personally, I get bored with movies that are simple. I don't normally rewatch them, but I think a Nolan film always brings me back, and every time you watch it, there's a new thing to understand about it. Which is honestly some people's criticism with the movie. They thought Tenet almost demands you to rewatch it. And I mean, we can get into that later, but basically their theory is you shouldn't have to rewatch a movie. A movie should be rewatchable, but you should be able to get enough understanding out of it the first time to walk away if you want. So,
well, I guess in that specific scenario, it totally depends on the audience. Because as you know, we went and saw this movie in theaters, and we had a friend who just wasn't into it, didn't really. They may have even understood a lot of it, but weren't really into it in the same way that we were. And I'll admit that I actually enjoy it more as time passes than I did when I came out of the theater. When I first came out of the theater, I was just like, oh, I like it. And as more time passes and I think more about what's going on conceptually and that story, I am learning to like it more. And it makes me want to see it again. It makes me want to see it again. Not forces me. I genuinely want to. And I mean, think about it in other types of mediums. Like, okay, you don't want to watch a movie twice, but there's plenty of people who may read a book twice over when they understand more about the plot the second time around. You read something and you come to find that there's a lot of things that you're missing out on. At least when a book is based upon multiple layers and concepts and trying to get deep about itself and philosophical and whatnot.
Right, and that's such a good point too, because I was just thinking about that the other day, how books and movies are reflected upon differently. At least when I was growing up, books were the intellectual path. If you read a book, you were smart. If you watch movies all the time, it's like a dumb stereotype.
Oh, you're lazy. Yeah.
I don't think. I think you can watch a movie and miss a lot, and then you're being lazy.
Yeah.
But I think in a way, it offers the same amount as a book, and I don't think rewatchability should be an issue. Mm-hmm. But then again, see, people criticize books that are complicated, and they're like, "Oh, you just didn't understand it. You're not smart enough." But then you get a complicated film like this, and they're like, "Oh, the director screwed it up,"
Yeah.
But anyway, not to get lost in that, because I do want to come back to that later. But I want to hit maybe the story more. Not so much a rehash, since we're assuming you guys have seen it already, but just talk about like the plot points, the acts and how they're divided up. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know what? One of the, I think, easier ways to go through this plot and to navigate the plot is how the characters interact with one another and who they are to one another, right? Because the cast is not that big. There's a lot of people under helmets and whatnot that we don't see and we don't know about. And we don't need to. We're not supposed to, because they don't matter. But how the protagonist interacts with Robert Pattinson's character Neil in the context of their relationship, or the wife of our antagonist Kat, and what's going on there, that kind of is what's throwing us around here and there. And things as simple as conversations are what's drastically changing the narrative, right? We do start off with who meets who first. The protagonist meets Kat first, right? And then he figures out about that's what happens. The protagonist meets up with, for a very short period, Michael Caine's character, in which he gets the lead about the painting, right? And that leads him to the Kat character, because she's the rich woman, I think, who has the painting property and whatnot, I suppose, is what's going on there. Because like I said, I have confusion about the painting section, right? And the person the protagonist ends up hooking up with is this Neil character, Robert Pattinson, to be the one to help him do the espionage and looking up the persons, and basically his co-worker for the continuation of the film. I don't know what word to put it as, because what they're doing is kind of different. And we don't meet our antagonist until a little bit in. We didn't see his face. We didn't have a face upon who and what is going on here until a little bit into it. We knew it was her husband, but nothing. They give you flashes. That's what was interesting. They give you flashes of the ideas and many of those things that were yet to come, and that if you blinked for like a second, you'd miss it, right? And even when you do see it, you got to have the effort to remember it as you go through. But yeah, you see with the protagonist and how he's interacting with Kat, how she's having an abusive relationship with this husband. And this husband, as we know, the reason that he's being so destructive is apparently because he's dying of a disease that is not going to be cured. There is no way out. And he has this mentality is that if I can't live, no one can live. And he's going to reverse the entire planet. It's insane like that. So everything's leading up to that one point at the end, for where they're playing catch up with this guy who's trying to destroy the world at this singular point. And the protagonist and Kat and Neil are all working together to try to stop this doomsday event from occurring. And all the intricacies with the timing, right? And the editing that's going on there. That if you're not aware of what's going on, like an hour before that point, there are a lot of people that might get lost with, especially that 10-minute war scene that happens where, they're having to get to, I guess it's a device. That's what I'm going to assume. Some sort of device that would start bringing the world backwards, right? But yeah, what Robert Pattinson's character is doing, what Kat's character is doing with the man out on the yacht, right? All these things are coming together all at once at different times, at different motions, right? To bring us to this climactic point in which it does not happen. She does kill him, and they all walk away happy, except for one. Which is Neil, of course.
Yeah. No, that's so true, though. I think the characters really are the vehicle of this movie. And that also leads me back to something you said earlier that I did want to touch on, is the fact that there is no name attached to the central character.
Mm.
I had that same reaction where I was like, did I miss it?
Yes.
I mean, in fairness, I didn't remember any of the names, so that's just my inability.
Well, I think I remember Neil. I did not remember anybody else.
Yeah. So it's like, it's clear that Nolan is trying to strip these characters down into ideas. And again, I come back to the criticism because a lot of people said, it's so funny to me because a lot of people said the character development wasn't good in this movie. And they pointed back to Inception, and apparently Leonardo DiCaprio said that he fought for his character development in that film. I don't know.
Oh, yeah?
It's funny to me how people like to dig up stuff when they think a movie came out bad, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
The point is, I don't think he was focused on the character development as much as he's focusing on stripping these people into ideas, right? So it's like a lot of people say good character development is when you can easily associate attributes to a character. Like Han Solo is, brash, arrogant, sarcastic, that type of thing.
Right.
I think what Nolan's doing here is trying to simplify that to the bare bones, where you have the protagonist who is this good guy. You have the Neil who is the sidekick. You have the bad guy. Then you have the damsel in distress. It's almost like the classic formula.
Yeah.
And it's so basic that it helps with the complexity of the film, because when you have those things you can grab onto, okay, this is the good guy. He's doing something. His sidekick's helping him. It makes it better storytelling.
Well, that's the beauty in complex ideas, isn't it?
Exactly.
Is that a lot of complex ideas can be presented in a very simplistic fashion, but it's not that it's always so much that it can be simple. It can be simple, but it's that it's so broad that it allows us to look deeper into the broad attributes of these different persons. Because, like we said, this cast is actually very small. There's not that many names under it, and a lot of people are just hidden under masks and whatnot. And those who are not hidden almost always play a fundamental role throughout the entire thing, to the plot, just all of it. And the protagonist, I actually, because I had just came across this idea as I was looking into the film again, was that, okay, he doesn't have a name. I didn't hear his name. I thought I missed it or something like that. But that actually is not the case, because as I came to realize is that the character, being the secret agent that he is, cannot reveal what his actual name is because of the work that he's doing. For a time traveler like the antagonist has knowledge of past events. So he's already, the things that he's sending into the past and the things that he's warning himself of, he meets the protagonist at some point, and that future self is still interacting with him, Wallace knowing this protagonist, all the way to the point in which the car crash scene in which they disconnect and he assumes that he's dead, right? But nobody, not Neil, not Kat, nobody actually knows this man's name. And that's important, because if they knew what his name was, it meant that someone like the antagonist, Sator, could find him when he was a kid, or seek him out when he wasn't even aware of what was going on, and kill him. So he's in the unique and perfect position for where he can operate against these. It's kind of like time-traveling, time-bending enemies who are entirely working off of information and where things are in the timeline of things in order to take advantage of the events going on around them. So that's a huge thing. It goes into even bigger implications when we're talking about the character of Neil, because frankly, I don't believe Neil is his real name. I do believe that that's not his real name. Well, but we're getting into theory territory there, but
I mean, that's an interesting rabbit hole, because you were saying after the showing you thought Neil was Catherine's son,
yes,
older.
I thought that was what was going to happen when I was halfway through the film. I was like, is this where it's going to go? It'd be such a twist, even though I'm predicting it,
So, like, was it just that you thought it would be a twist, or do you think there was some groundwork laid for that?
Let me tell you why, because I've had a lot of time to think about it after the fact. First of all, which is the worst reason, it's because I thought, one, they looked similar. It does look like Sator's and Kat's son. It does look like that. But that's not the really good reason. That's not why. Okay. As we knew by the end of the film, he's been doing this for years. He's been doing the time-traveling thing, and they've been connected to this protagonist for a very long time. The child doesn't have any lines. They hardly show his face. Like we said, it's like it kind of focuses on this cast a big deal, right? But the things that Neil does know, and the hindsight that he does have, and the idea that there's years and years that the protagonist and Neil would apparently had known each other prior to the events that are taking place in this film makes you rewatch these scenes and then think, everything that Neil's saying has a deeper implication in what's going on. The first thing that Neil starts asking from the protagonist is that, would he kill a woman or something? He said something along the lines of, would you kill a woman to do what you're doing? And then he says, would you kill a child? He never goes into any sort of other woman, child. And I believe it's being asked because he's also figuring out where the protagonist is at this point. Has he already interacted with these people? Has he already this and that, right? Because he's been interacting with this guy for years and he's still figuring it out. I think one of the bigger reasons why I think it is the case, but I don't think Christopher Nolan nor Robert Pattinson would ever say if it's true or not. If this theory is true. Okay. But the son of Kat and Sator is Max. That's his name, Max. Mm-hmm. Well, Max is a shorter name for Maximilian. Right. And now Tenet is, as you know, the word Tenet is just Tenet backwards. It's working. I forget what you call it, but essentially it's a word. It has a meaning both ways. It works both ways. Yeah. And I forget what this tablet is called, right? I didn't come prepared, in which Christopher Nolan has used this exact tablet that has the word Tenet on it for the names of these characters and the meanings behind them, including someone like Sator and having deeper meanings, right? Well, Maximilian, right? If you take away Maxima, you end up with Leon, which is Neil backwards. Now I'm just saying. Okay. Robert Pattinson is Max. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying it's an absolute. He did in fact have to. He said he dyed his hair for the role, right? Come on, folks. I'm just saying it's obvious. It's obvious. I'm telling you.
How did you even put that together? That's crazy.
Well, let me also put it like this: is that the very last shot is Robert Pattinson talking, and that's what I thought they were going to imply too. I thought that's where they were going. And I'm clearly not the only one who's thought this, because I've seen some theory threads with this, and I thought this naturally. Nobody's told me this, right? I see the kid. It kind of looks like him. And we understand that he is perhaps going to reestablish this relationship with Kat as time moves forward. These problems don't just stop after this movie. It's implied that he's still going to have to deal with these kind of foes as we continue on, because the real initial conflict is not this antagonist. Antagonist did not invent the things that are going on. It's scientists way in the future who are sending things through the past. This is what I ended up reading up on, is the idea was that the beings and people of the future are keeping the people of our time accountable for the things yet to come. So they're willing to send things into the past and show them things into the past, preparing them into a position in which they can change events, or rather correct events into the way that they would be, knowing that it's going to come to the point in which they're prepared and withhold things such as global warming. That's what I read into the description of what was going on there. All that to say is that Robert Pattinson being the one speaking at the very end there, there are a couple holes with the idea, is that the real question I only have, which would throw away this entire theory, is that does one de-age as they're going backwards? And the only reason that's even being asked is like, well, surely not. Well, hold on. Objects that are moving into the past are able to go back to a prior form when it's going backwards. And when you're in, the public area outside of the machines and whatnot, you have to wear this breath mask because matter is operating in the opposite direction for you. So everything from particles and all this stuff that you're breathing in has to be reversed in order for you to function. Now, there's already some things consciousness-wise that isn't making sense for me. It's like, well, you can't be moving backwards and yet thinking thoughts forwards. It doesn't make sense. But this is a fictional film. Maybe we're thinking too much into it in that sense. But the fact that you have to breathe something in the opposite direction in order for you to actually continue breathing may lead somebody to think that, well, does that mean you're also de-aging at the same rate too? Are you going backwards when it comes to your appearance and age? That could throw everything off, because Max, if Max is Neil, if he was to, let's say, start when he's 20 and Robert Pattinson's like maybe getting into his 30s now, that would mean to get all the way back to the events of this film, he'd have to go 10 years backwards before he'd start doing any of this. And that's considering that he's not stopping. If he goes 10 years backwards, that would also make him 10 years younger, if that's the case. So I've heard some ideas back and forth. Needless to say, it gets complicated for where maybe he goes forwards as soon as he's like 13 and starts going backwards when he's 13. Assuming that de-aging doesn't have an effect, he can still remain in around the current timeline without having been 20 years in the future and then going 20 years back, all that stuff. So all that's just theory after all. But I do think that, like his other films like The Prestige and Inception, those are one of those ideas that are left at the very end that I think is purposefully there. And I do think this is the resolve is that as slight and nuanced as it may be, and maybe it's not even too important, but that Max is actually Neo. But I don't know. That's just a theory.
That was good. Wow.
That was a lot there. I'm sorry.
No. It was good.
There.
Wow. I'm still hung up on the whole Maximilian Neil thing.
That's right. See, I'm smarter than you think, Joseph.
Oh, okay.
To be fair, I didn't figure that one out. I had to look into it more because I didn't even remember the kid's name. But it's like, let's just think about it for a second here, guys. This is how this movie wants to operate. Oh, one more thing that I found also is that the movie's called Tenet,
right,
which is together 10-10. The very last battle occurs in 10 minutes. 10 minutes moving forward and 10 minutes moving backwards. That's all. Tenet.
Oh,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah,
the problem,
right?
Good theories, but if Nolan's handling of the ending of Inception is any warning, we'd never know for sure. Unfortunately,
that's right.
But
that's right.
Yeah, that blew my mind a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But anyway, piggybacking off of that, let's talk about Neo outside of that theory, right? So The second time I watched the movie, I was like, it was the whole opera scene. And there's that part towards the end where he's about to get shot with like a reverse bullet.
That's right.
And he gets like, I don't remember if he gets pushed out of the way or the gunman gets pushed. But the man that saves him quickly turns around and runs away. And it's Neil. Yes. We see the keychain on the backpack, which I totally didn't catch the first time because... Yeah,
I didn't know that. Right,
yeah,
I had to see that in the second time around. Was that I remember seeing it in the theaters? That guy doing the reverse,
but it doesn't.
And
stick.
I was just like, "Wait a minute, what's going on there?" And he didn't even acknowledge it. Almost, he acknowledged it, but he didn't think anything of it. I was just like, "Wait a minute, what happened there?" Oh well, they might reveal it later, and they didn't really talk about it. But yeah, at a second viewing, you come to realize, "Wait a minute, all right, Neil just saved him. Neil's doing things right now."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd even argue that Neil is like such a more important player in this movie. It's hard to say because another thing that hit me too is at the end of the movie you find out that John David Washington's protagonist is literally the dude that orchestrating all of this. In the future he's older and now he has all this knowledge, so is basically the plot is moving backwards. So as time moves forward for him, he's now reaching into the past to stop this event. It's very weird how Nolan set that up, but not to dwell on that.
Yeah. To the point for where the Indian woman that he had hired, well, that's the point. That was the point. Was that he was the one who had actually hired her from the very start, and that she didn't even know, just to get her set up and expose her for her intentions and end up killing her in the end. So it's so crazy because
plots just don't normally work like that. Like we're literally seeing the ending of the story. We're not seeing the beginning where the future people are mad. And I think a lot of time films start in the future and work their way back. But we're just totally, we still don't know what Tenet really is. We know a little bit now more about what the protagonist's role and what Neil's role is. But I think it's cool to see that just dynamic throughout the film of Neil. And he even says, like, at one point, he's like, "You've always known way too much," and he thinks he's a traitor. The protagonist says that to Neil.
Right.
And it's true, like, even, it blew my mind, too, because when they first meet, Neil orders the drinks, and he orders, like, I don't know, some kind of cocktail, and then a Diet Coke. And he's like, "Oh, I know you don't drink on the job." And he knows all these things about him. And you think, oh, he's a spy. Yeah, well, you're led to think he's a spy and he gets information because he's a spy, but it's really him. And it's when you watch it the second time, that relationship, which is solidified in the ending scene, is just so much more rich, I think. Yeah. It's great. I love it.
It was actually kind of sad because I was not expecting that to happen. I thought there was going to be a way that somehow he was going to stop him from dying. But as soon as I saw the guy on the ground and I knew that Robert Pattinson's character was running back to go save him and all that, I thought that, dude, I already know that he's dead. Please tell me you're going to flip him over and he's still breathing. He's just really, really hurt or something. It's like, oh no. The protagonist just has to watch, because I guess he's already accepted with everything that's happened, is that which happens and has happened happens. So there's not really anything you do. It's just that it's happening and you're about to allow it to occur. Or you're about to be a part of it, right? Or you've misunderstood what's been going on, or you're missing out details, but you can't really change anything. And that's another thing is that the protagonist is talking to Neil about that when they're in the ambulance, and they're talking about the grandfather paradox. Is that can one go to your grandfather? I don't know if this is how he said it. Go to your grandfather, kill your grandfather, then how do you come to exist? And Robert Pattinson's character is like, it doesn't matter if they can or can't. The bad guy, Sator, thinks he can. People think that they can. And that's the problem, is that we can't just sit back and risk the scenario for where they attempt it, because in the case for Sator, you don't find out otherwise. You can't find out otherwise. But they do keep up the rules, is that no grandfather paradox does occur in this entire thing. Nothing that happens didn't happen before. And and it's so great. You can see it in the editing. It's just fantastic editing for where, and part of me wants to see certain scenes in reverse just to see if it somehow translate the same way. Cause genuinely, I don't know how they did it. Cause even the reverse shots or the forward moving shots look like a forward moving shot. And there's just some things for where it's like, surely it's not a reverse thing, but I want to see it anyways.
The magic of compositing. But anyway, I love that, and I think that's one of the main morals, but I want to save that towards the end and come back to I think two key confusing scenes are the beginning opera house scene and then the painting. So let's start with the opera house. I watched it the second time. I still didn't know what was going on, honestly.
Yeah,
like I know the objective. It was clear because he grabs I guess what they're after, which is one of the pieces of the algorithm, which is what you later find out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so what apparently that whole battle was over that piece, and then he didn't know that, and then that leads into the events of the film. But and then you have the guy who he's trying to save, which I'm still not clear on, and
yeah, me too.
I'm really not clear who the bad guys are. But yeah, I don't know. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, part of it was still a test, remember?
Right.
Is that he gets captured by some guys and is getting, tortured, seeing if he'd give up information. And he went as far as to take the pill that he thought would kill him. But we find out is that, no, it's not killing him. It's putting him to sleep. He wakes up. And some sort of general, some sort of person who's involved with he's not really involved with Tenet. He just knows of it. He doesn't know about it. Comes to tell him that you've proven yourself worthy, that you were willing to die and not give out information, which has now brought you to the next level. And now you can be a part of this Tenet, right? And I guess a lot of it you could say is because that shows that he's ready to hold these kind of secrets and that he be reliable and trusted upon. But I think one thing that this movie kind of tells us is that this guy, we don't know where he goes, but because of how involved he is, he is probably the one who is setting up every last one of these details involving these things. And he's leading these other military soldiers and these other people back and forth and working with it. We don't see him while this version of him is moving around, but he is moving around. He is setting up these things, and we see the effects because of what other people claim and how these things turn out. I wouldn't be surprised, I don't know if Tenet is something created way in the future, or if he is the one who eventually makes the formal introduction of Tenet when the technology is fully realized of how it occurs. But yeah.
No, that's a good point. So basically the protagonist is orchestrating his own test is what you're kind of, that's crazy. Yeah. I think that just kind of clicked for me too.
You'd think it'd be almost paradoxical and like, well, wait a minute, you can't, but that's not true. Because in his perspective, he is doing one thing after the other. but his past, himself in the future is affecting the experiences of himself in the past, and he's the one orchestrating them. There is no paradox. It's just he's experiencing them all so uniquely because he doesn't have the knowledge or the understanding of what's going on. So to him, it's all unique, while his future self has a complete understanding as to what's going on. I would have liked, in that sense, to have seen maybe a future self. That would have been really interesting if a future self was talking to himself, but not, disclosing information. But I don't know if you could be like, good luck, man, get in there kind of thing. Like you'll be good. Don't worry. Right. I thought one of the best shots actually was when they were going in, they were going to try to save her, Kat, to the medical thing. And just before they go through the machine that pulls them backwards, they can see themselves on the other side, looking at themselves like, looks like we already made our decision. And they go in, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And they go out and they look at the other self, and it's exactly the same. I'm just like, wow, that's so cool. It makes it so real. I want that.
Yeah. No, arguably, I think that's where the movie clicks into place and you start to kind of understand how it works. But yeah, I mean, I'd even argue that, again, coming back to our point earlier, the reason we don't see an older version of him is because, again, this is not a sci-fi movie where the future guy is, it's not Terminator Genesis where they're in the future and then they get sent back. This is just like its own story, and we just have to kind of make up what the future is doing, which is cool. I think it's unique.
Yeah. It creates that abstract, which I actually enjoy more in many ways, is that don't show me that future society that is sending these things in the past and orchestrating these things. Put it in my perspective as an audience viewer who's in that theater and is being introduced with this new concept of reality and what's going on, so that I am not feeling detached. I can be attached to these characters and not have some sort of knowledge of things that I don't understand, which may actually play a part, let's just say, as to why certain shots of flashbacks, right, don't last long. They're just slight images, just so that we can still remain in that position for where we're experiencing this with the main protagonist, rather than being shown more information than the protagonist should know.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's just a Nolan thing overall. I mean, especially hopefully we get to Memento at some point, but that is another film where he just teases the audience and you really don't get the clear picture till the end, which is, I think, a really cool way to tell a story. But yeah, no, I think that's a good point. The Opera House is a way of... we don't know what's going on because neither does the protagonist. He's there because he's told to be there, but he doesn't know really what's going on. And yeah, I think that was a good point.
Well, I guess that to conclude with how Christopher Nolan kind of gives you information in this film, I had to basically trust. I had to trust that he is not going to allow there to be plot holes or something like that. That he's had enough time, a very long time, to write out this script. That everything that he's showing me, he isn't being unfair. That I don't understand. Good. He's doing that on purpose. He didn't say that yet. He didn't give that information. That's because he doesn't want you to know it. So that's okay that you don't know it, right? Just make sure you're focusing so that you don't miss out on the things that he does want you to know. And the things that he doesn't care for you to know is like the protagonist's name. You don't need to be knowing that. That's not significant. I want you not to know that. You don't need to understand the circumstances prior to them running into this opera house. You don't need to. Go ahead. Be thrown in there. Have that mystery factor for where you're focused. You want to figure out things, and that'll allow you to be more attentive in the less action and thrill-inducing scenes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I think we should touch on the painting too, because you brought it up after we saw it, and you thought it was going to play a bigger role, which the second time I watched it, it really, I felt the same way. The first time I was just like hanging on by a thread, so I could barely have an opinion on things like that. Yeah. But yeah, the second time I was just like, why are they spending so much time on this painting that doesn't even, like, there was so many different ways you could have weaved that narrative. Like, they could have just broken into the airport because they had suspicions that there was arms being stored there, not have anything to do with the painting. So I don't know, like, to me, and this kind of channels into editing, which is something I want to talk about. The editing itself is, like, the editing of the compositing, let me say, is really good. where you have the effects of the reversal and the forward moving things in the same shot, which is really good. I guess that's more of an effects than editing, but I think overall the actual editing of the sequences for the first half of the movie is not that great. And to me, that's evidenced by the painting, and I think it's a main reason why people didn't like the movie. Because for me, the second time around, it felt like he was trying to like mimic the James Bond style of this is a clue which leads to this new place where there's another clue. But then you had things like going back to Mumbai like 2 or 3 times, which kind of takes you out of that flow. Or this painting, which is just thrown to the side. And overall, it feels like there's just no rhythm to the editing. And I feel like it's fixed for the second half of the film. But I think that's the second time I watched it around, I was more irritated about that in the first half. I felt more like this could have been edited more clearly. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, no, I mean, like I said, that is probably the most confusing, as funny as that might seem. Probably because of the editing, that I'm not able to understand what was going on with the painting and what was its significance in the film. I thought like I missed a line of dialogue that was significant or something that I couldn't hear what was going on or whatever. But there's a couple factors, like you said, that they focus on this, and it seems like he's trying to hit certain beats of what is classically in a spy-like film. And this may be, this might be some aspects of that. But part of me wonders is if there was, there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes, and he could have had certain aspects of the script that would have came into fruition in some way, but either because of runtime or because they ended up wanting to go in a different direction, the plot shifts entirely.
Right.
So there could have been at points, let's say that painting could have been a lot more significant at one point, but ended up just being, okay, know what, we're just going to let that be this jumping off point. We don't have time. It's a decent jumping off point, blah, blah, blah. And then it turns more into what's going on with the boat and this vacation spot and what's happening here in this land, etc.
Right.
And it may have even grown beyond it. That's the thing, is that as it started to get its momentum, the director has the right to just say, let's add upon it in this way. Actually, let's have this kind of scene. You know what? Let's do this instead. And it ended up evolving into a different type of movie. And the last thing I could imagine with it is that the runtime may have been a lot more before they ended up cutting it down to what is considered, what's the word?
Theatrical?
Consumable to the public eye. It's easy to maybe watch something like Avengers Endgame for 3 hours, right, where there's just constant visual going on and on and on, right? And even then, a lot of people have to go to the bathroom. With Tenet, I don't know if you're going to get that kind of luxury, because it does demand a lot of attention, and it does know that if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss out a lot. So you can't be having your bathroom breaks. This movie could have been 3 hours at first, and a lot of directors get lost, and they have to cut down on a lot. And frankly, this is maybe one of those aspects, is that this painting and what was going on in that entire, I guess you could say, first act of the film, is belittled into being just an aspect of what would actually be the jumping off point into the real meat of the story. And that's what I'm saying, is that painting aspect was really just slowing things down. I really wanted to get into that time manipulating stuff. I wanted to see it in action, and we weren't being given that meat until we reached Act 2.
Yeah, and I think Act 2 really, really ties it together, and I think the editing gets a lot better, and it's just a more enjoyable movie.
Yeah.
As far as runtime, I that irritated me as well, because I know he edited it quickly. It feels like a very fast-paced movie. And he did that because of runtime, and probably because of the feeling too. But there's just so many scenes, like the whole Michael Caine meal just feels unnecessary, right? And it just feels like he's doing it for the cameo of having Michael Caine, because he's in most of his movies. Or like, I'm trying to remember specifics. Like there would be like a jump from Mumbai to London, and it's like, whoa. And you don't get like title cards either, which... Right. Title cards are distracting, I'd argue, but then you have like this like 30-second sequence of him walking into the building. Well, did we need that 30-second sequence? And I think a director who masters transitions is Edgar Wright, because I just recently watched Baby Driver, and they had the scene in there where he's standing in front of a car, But then he wants the location to change. So he changes the location, but the position of the car and the position of the actor and the position of the camera all remain the same. Mm-hmm. But the setting around, if you can visualize it, the setting changes. And it's an excellent way of navigating the viewer through the scene changes that I just don't feel is present. It's almost like they were so close to the forest in the sense that we need to make sure this motion of going back and forth looks good, that they just forgot like the basics of leading the viewer through London, through Mumbai, through like even the boat sequence is another one that comes to mind. He's on this boat. He does like 3 sets of pull-ups for no reason. And then
that's kind of true, yes.
And then he's right. Off the boat again. It's
without the right oxygen anyways. He's outside. It's like I can't breathe. I gotta get my pull-ups going.
Yeah, it's just it just seems weird for that entire first half. And then the second half, when they actually get into the complicated editing, I think it's like extremely good editing.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I noticed.
Well, maybe the resources were a little bit more properly devoted into the second half of the film. Right. And it's probably because they recognize that this is where we really get into these timeline concepts. This is where we have to focus, because if we get this wrong, we're going to confuse everybody, including ourselves. First half, there's not much going on there. I mean, let's think about it. Even the characters, I didn't think a character was going to be moving backwards. The soldiers, we saw a couple soldiers, which ended up being the main character, going backwards. But I thought that, we're just talking about objects here, and they're going to be fighting, shooting bullets backwards. Woohoo. I didn't even think about the idea of them sending themselves backwards, or if they even had the ability to send anything backwards themselves. And we come to find that at the beginning of the second half. And that's where all these time shifting and the intricacies of what's going on militarily, right? The entire tone, I feel like, even shifts from being what was a spy movie into what is almost like a militaristic styled movie, where you have these operations and this villain that's going on, even if it's a singular villain, and you're having to be very strategic. You're even given that military outline from the start. What was a spy ended up becoming a guy in what looked like an Iraq military uniform. And I think what happens in the first half of the film is that the cinematographer, which is different than a different cinematographer than a lot of Christopher Nolan's other films. Usually he has Wally Pfister, and he does such a great job. You know, he did Dark Knight, he did a basic. I think he did Inception, and he did The Prestige, and he's all about that lighting. He's all about giving those right tones and getting the right shots for where it forces you to feel something. The cinematographer in this film was, I guess his name is Hoyt van Hoytema. Hoytema?
Sounds right. We're sorry. If we
I wonder. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I don't know.
If you're listening to this podcast, first of all, thank you. And second of all, we're sorry. I'm sorry, Hoyt. Please don't hate me. I'm inspired by your work, but I'm about to criticize your work. But Hoyt, the cinematography, assuming that, let's say he's in charge of things like the chase scene and the action sequences, super good. Very good. I wonder how you're able to do that, considering how a lot of it probably is special effects, and he's having to acknowledge all these different shots very fast, many cuts. But the first half of the film, everything's a little elegant. Notice when he goes to see Michael Caine, right? He's in a really nice setting, really nice suit, apparently not nice enough, and it's really fabulous, if you will. It's very prestige. And then you go later on and you're talking, like literally even the costumes are that of rich people, these rich settings, and everywhere they go, even when they're talking to these simple characters, like you're saying, you go to Britain and you see these, what looks like fabulous and very clean settings. But to some people who are watching the film from the first half to the second half, it's completely different tone-wise. And I think it's relying entirely on the setting rather than what's going on with the camera and what's going on with the characters and what they're saying in order to give it that elegant vibe. And I don't know if it's because that's exactly what they want you to feel, so that when we really get into it, we really get into it, or it's because they think that, you know, elegant prestige people like these kind of shots. Like, isn't that a pretty shot? Look at how pretty the place is. Look at that boat on that Italian-like island. Woo! Look at that. That's a good point.
Like, a lot of things that you think that, okay, why in the world are we doing this? This isn't normal. Why are we out eating dinner like this? Why are we here? Why am I doing the boat scene just for us to push him off, right? Is it because they want to get those beautiful looking shots and they're forcing the scenario to be that way? Maybe. It's definitely possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought of that because that's another one. That whole boat scene really was out of place, but it's visually a nice shot. So yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's a good point. The first half of the movie is more of a showcase, and then the second half is actually okay. This is a film. Follow along. The shots complement the story and the action.
I like how you said that. Showcase sounds like a pretty close word, like a showcase of the places that they are, and hoping that how cool the place may look. I say cool, but it's not that it's cool. It's that it's just so elegant and pristine. Pristine? Is that the word? Pristine. No, I don't know. I said prestige earlier. I'm not sure if that was the right word.
Well, it's Christopher Nolan, so maybe it works.
Yes. So I get a pass.
Anyway,
sorry, Hoyt. Sorry again.
Yeah, I mean, at least the tone. I think the drab colors match the movie, and I think it tied in. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it really does feel like two halves. And so let's talk a little bit about the second half and just the editing there. I mean, I thought. So let me break this down a little bit, just so we have an idea. They're traveling forward in time. Then bad dude gets in machine, travels backwards in time, shoots his wife. So then protagonist has to do the same. He has to jump in the machine and travel backward in time. Yeah. Then apparently they have to keep going back in time. I'm not too clear on this, but they have to keep going back on time to the date of that whole boat trip, because that's when the pivotal moment is.
Right, they keep going back.
And then half of them switch to forward, and the other half stay in back to complete the mission. And I got none of that the first time around. Like, I was the one, like you said, who used the bathroom, and that was end game for me.
Did you go to the bathroom?
I did. I went right in the pivotal scene.
I didn't see you.
Right in the airport scene where where basically everything clicks.
No.
And I just totally missed it.
Not good. I think, now that I remember, I think I tried to lean over and say something like, they're going backwards in time now. They're going to the airport I forget why they were even going there in the first place. I forget.
They went back because that's how they had to go forward in time, right? So they're moving backwards in time, and they have to switch, and that's the place that they know a turnstile exists.
Was that can't be right.
No, I guarantee.
Is it really?
Yeah. So he jumps in the machine to save the wife because she needs to be inverted, and he also tries to get the bad guy, but that doesn't work very well. So then him, Neil, and Catherine need to switch back to forward.
So wait, did the machine when they... Okay.
Yeah, because think about it. They're going backwards, right? And then their selves are going forwards from a week earlier. And then they switch places. That's why there's two of him in there, because he's going backwards. Right. And that's when he's fighting the other guy. Or fighting himself, actually. And then when he switches forward is when he's running away from Neil, and Neil lets him escape.
Right.
So, yeah... I thought that was well done.
No, yeah, of course. I understand the plot of what was going on, but my mind for a second there was thinking like, well, why didn't we just take Kat as soon as she was injured and bring her through the machine again to bring her forward? But I think one of the plot details that they say is that she needs to heal or something like that without going forward, because if she goes forward and all that while she's in this state or something like that, because she got harmed in the specific way that she did, it has to be healed this way. I'm not sure. I noticed that she only goes forward again once they're brought back to that yacht point, and they end up using that as a part of their plan to try to rendezvous with him, who has also gone to the past and allowed his past self to go to another point, and same with her. So both future selves are on the yacht, and he doesn't know that. He thinks that it's her.
Right.
Her past self.
That was well done. Right. Sator does, to clarify.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a question, kind of a rabbit trail. Is there more than one I don't know how to even put it, more than one representation of the person in time? Because they jump back and forth at least like 3 times. So does that mean there's 3 protagonists running around doing things? That
Yeah, I'd say there's way more. I'd say that the protagonist, which is why I think it's so important that he doesn't have a name, him specifically, is because he is moving around so often
right.
and is working so many ways that if he was to use his real name or have a name while doing the things that he's doing, it would even mix himself up and everybody that's working with him up. You've got to deal with this guy where he is when he's doing it, right? And this guy, yeah, I'd say it's way more. If you were to probably count, it's probably at certain points in the film 5 different ones of himself. And I say that because at the very end of the film, we're brought to one of the first scenes with the mother and the son, and the one lady is ready to kill the mother and son, and he's there again. But he was also there to hire her, which means he's gone back to the past again. But he's also been to the future where he met Neil for the first time and has been with him long enough for where they could go all the way to the past and still interact again. Right? So it's like he's multiple times. I think he just purposefully doesn't interact with the scenarios that his self in those moments is currently dealing with. Right? So he's being strategic that, because like you said, you're not supposed to make physical contact with yourself in other at other points either, even though he did fight himself at one point, which is why I was like, wait a minute, I thought you're not supposed to have that contact. Well, as long as you wear the gloves, I guess.
That's fair.
But
well, that was another thing too, like in that fight gunshots are fired, so I'm like, is he trying to kill himself? Is he trying to like make it look good? Like, what is going on there? Why
Well, he didn't. I don't think that other guy. I don't think he genuinely tried to shoot himself when he fought himself when he was going backwards.
Right. I don't think so either.
I think,
but it's
as funny as it is. I think it's coincidental. As crazy as that is, he is fighting in defense because he's jumping out at him, and they immediately start fighting. He's like, "Whoa, whoa!" and he's having to fight his. It's honestly awesome, and I gotta watch it again because it's kind of clever. From both him and Robert Pattinson's side when they're fighting.
He's in that building 3 times at the same time.
Yeah,
so that's crazy.
There's only one Robert Pattinson. There's 3 of him in that shot. That's awesome.
That's crazy. But
yeah.
Anyway, let's channel. Like, I just want to talk briefly about the acting because I was kind of first of all, Robert Pattinson surprises me because he was the Twilight heartthrob. Then he went to like a bunch of indie films, and now he's like crazy big again. And then Elizabeth Debicki, I know, is she's kind of coming up as well. And John David Washington, this was like his 2nd or 3rd major movie. Like he was. Go for it.
I can't even remember. I'm looking at it now. I guess he was in the Black Klansman.
Right.
And now that I'm looking at it, I remember that movie, but I actually hadn't seen it. So this is the first movie that I've seen with his work, and he's kind of just done some things maybe here and there. This is perhaps the biggest thing that he's ever done. It's going to have a huge impact for his Hollywood career. I know that.
Well, Black Klansman arguably thrusted him forward because that got a lot of Oscar attention. But anyway, none of that really matters. What matters is his performance is good, And I guess he's Denzel Washington's son, so the genes transfer. I don't know.
I did not know that.
Oh, okay.
I did not know he was Denzel Washington's son.
Like, when did you find out?
You just.
Oh, are you serious?
I did not know this is Denzel Washington's son.
I didn't know that either until a couple months ago.
Holy cow! I didn't know that. Yeah, I see it now in his Google bio. Denzel Washington.
Yep.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think it shows. It shows because it is really his only 4th or 5th movie total, and he does a good job, arguably.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I'd want to see him in more work. I think he how do I put this? There are a lot of ways you could probably play characters like this, but what I really can appreciate is that he doesn't make it what it's not, or what Christopher Nolan would be against what Christopher Nolan would have him to be. He is that American spy-like character, that professional person.
Right.
And I believe it too. That's the thing, is that I do believe it. If I was interacting with that guy in real life, I'd know that he's real. It's not some sort of, I could take him seriously is the point, is that I could believe that he is talented in the ways that he presents himself.
Right.
And that can come from the subtle expressions that he has just throughout the whole film. That's what I could say about it, is that I do believe the character that he is projecting.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel like a ripoff of James Bond at all.
Yeah, no.
And it's so much more believable. Like I really just watched the Bond films over quarantine, and like the dude gets. I don't really want to spoil another movie. He does impossible things and he survives. But John David Washington's character, it just feels so much more grounded, which I think is a Nolan-esque thing. You know, he grounded the Batman character very well.
He's not even pretentious.
Yeah.
I'd say even like with Batman, he's trained to just be stoic at times in his fighting style. But John David Washington, when he's fighting and all that, he is scared at times. He's breathless. He's like, whoa, whoa. It doesn't matter that he's trained. When you're fighting, you're fighting. And this guy, he's not a stoic person, but he does take what he's doing seriously. And he's not some sort of comedic guy. I can tell you that. There's not really, I don't know if there's much of any comedy in this film. Maybe some side things here and there, but not really much from him. He portrays himself as competent, but not unrealistic. And that's the thing, where James Bond might be doing some things for where it's like, that's just ridiculous. Don't act like that was nothing. Don't have that stoic face. You did not do that before. Don't give me that look. When Washington does something crazy, it's genuinely crazy. And he's like, this is crazy. Without it, yet again, not being comedic. It's like just genuinely crazy. And everybody in the audience are like, this is crazy with him.
Well, I do.
Even his woe, if you will. When he shot the bullet, I remember seeing it in a trailer before, but the timing just was the same with me. He was just like, you're catching the bullet.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's just like, he's processing the new reality. And he's just like,
that was good.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and he's not even like, arguably he's not even confident, because, you know, I love that quip earlier in the film where he's talking about needing to get an audience with Catherine. And he's like, you take my matters, you overestimate my matters of seduction, you know, which is totally a jab at James Bond, as is the suit coat.
Oh, that's so cool.
And it's like, it's just saying like, this dude, you know, he's trained to do things. He's not out there, you know, he's doing what he's supposed to do.
Right.
And even then, he's not always adequate to do other things. You know, it's just, I love that, as opposed to the James Bond style where the man just does everything. You know, we already, and
he does it. He's not afraid. No, I'll point out one more scene is when he's at that dinner with the husband, and he thinks that she's cheating on him with him, right? And he immediately starts threatening him. I can't even repeat what he said he would do to him, right? They rip it off, put it in his mouth, kind of thing. And you, even in the audience, are like, what is he gonna do? He's just a guy. He's not gonna jump off the ledge right here and land in a pool or something like that. That's not the world we're dealing with.
Right.
We may have time bending elements, but we're not jumping off the balcony, landing in pools.
That's good.
Yeah, and you get genuinely concerned.
I think his acting carries that through really well. There are quips that sometimes get lost because he's just so serious, but I think that's part of the film.
Right.
Well, another thing, let's touch on people complained about the sound design as being too loud, like, you know, like the sailboat scene, for instance, or the opera scene, or the ending scene.
Yes.
And the dialogue being too mumbly, which is intriguing because I didn't feel that in the theater.
Oh, yeah? I did.
Okay.
I did when it came to the boat scene. When that was happening, I genuinely, I thought there was a problem with the theater.
Okay.
But after going online and, yes, reading the same thing for where people were hearing sound issues, I am surprised. Because if there's anywhere where a lot of directors really focus on, where maybe a lot of novice don't, is the sound design. The sound is a lot and is everything.
Well, what's interesting, too, is that this is not the first time a complaint against Nolan has been made, because in The Dark Knight Rises, people had the same problem with Bane.
Really? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I watched that film for the first time a couple years ago, not when it came out. And I had not read anything on it. And I was like, I can't understand what this man is saying. Like, I rewound it, I guess, because it was on DVD. And I'm like, I can't. Like, even the commentary.
You inverted it. Yeah, I understand.
Even the commentary was like, Bane speaking commentary is like muffled dialogue. I don't know.
Even the subtitles in the movie is slightly opaque. Just to make you a little confused.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, is he just making the same mistake over again? Is it a mistake? I don't know, you know?
Is he trying to make the audience more confused? It's just like, look, this scene isn't confusing. Yes, we did come out here to drive these boats, but I want you to get confused again, all right? So we're going to turn the volume of their voices down and turn it up. There are a couple possibilities, but I don't think it's a real excuse, right? They could have used only the mics that were present there, like during the boat scene. And maybe he has a personal goal that I don't want to have to re-record lines for these actors, and they're not going to be available even if I wanted to. So we can only use the raw recordings of what's on set.
That'd be rough.
Well, those boats are intense, all right? Those things are loud. And if you're getting audio, which would be surprising, from what they're saying there, and that's actually what you're using, then the amount of noise, white noise, and what do you call it, the threshold in which audio starts to max out and then starts to sound really bad, you have to lower that dB as much as possible. And it may have got to a point for with those actors that you could hardly hear them. So what we're calling really bad may actually be a blessing under those contexts. But I don't know if it is much of an excuse. I would just re-record the lines. But like I said, maybe there's something personal going on there.
Well, maybe too, Nolan is so focused on realism in a fantastical world that, and I think even if you go to Dunkirk, people lauded the sound design in that movie because you hear the movie from the protagonist's perspective. So maybe it's just another theory could be he wants it to sound deafening. He wants you to have a hard time hearing it because that's how it'd really be. Bane would be muffled because, let's face it, you got a spider mask thing on your face. You're not going to be able to be heard that well.
Well, then why can the other characters understand so well?
I know.
All right, that's the only question.
That's a good
then.
point.
Maybe it's just that, well, if you were where that guy was standing, you'd hear it quite well. But we're hearing it from the camera's perspective.
That's what you don't want to do.
Would sound like this right here.
Yeah, and you don't want to alienate your audience like that. I don't know. I wish I could sit the man down and ask him that, because he's a genius in film, and yet this seems like a recurring problem. Anyway, Christopher Nolan, if you're listening to this, first of all, thank you. We're honored. We love you. And second of all, we'd love to have you on a podcast. And third of all, we'd love to have the answer to that question.
Hold on. Give me just one moment.
Are you tweeting him?
No. I just wanted to see if they had a sound designer.
I'm sure.
Or I don't know what you would call it. Richard King.
Oh.
Richard King.
Well, the good news is because no movies have come out this year, you still could win the Academy Award for Best Sound Design.
Yes, in the special edition, the sound designer's cut of the film. See, he would have had it another way, but Christopher Nolan was
gosh.
No, see, that's not realistic.
Wait, what's his name?
Right.
What's his name again?
I'll have to pull it up. Hold on.
Release the sound designer cut. Hashtag release the sound.
Yeah, I want the sound designer cut. Richard King. Richard King, I want the sound designer
Hashtag
cut.
release the Richard King cut.
Wow. I looked that up, and yes, one of the first results is a video saying, "Does it suck? The controversial sound of Tenet."
Oh, gosh.
Which is funny, too, because I love the music of this film. I think it's so unique and very fitting for this film. I love the music.
Let's talk about that. Yeah, go for it. Why don't you start us in?
Well, let me look up the orchestrator. It turns out that the Hans Zimmer is usually the one that Christopher Nolan hires for his film. But Hans Zimmer is actually working for the soundtrack for the Dune that's coming up, which we're totally going to have to see.
So stoked. Although it's been pushed back a year.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Unfortunately.
I'm going to have to see the other ones, too, before we go see that one. But I'm already intrigued, and I've seen almost nothing, which means it's probably going to be all right.
Dude, I started reading the book, and I'm just really stoked now, frankly.
Yeah. Well, what is the word? Tenets. Let's get this one.
Oh, yeah, orchestra score. I don't know. Well, another thing I want to add while you're looking that up is Nolan used Travis Scott as I think it was just one track in the soundtrack, but it's one that it's that throbbing sound that pops up in the film. I think at least twice, in the beginning and in the middle, maybe more than that. Yeah. And first of all, it's cool that someone like Nolan is reaching out to a hip hop genre artist to craft. It's just cool to see that you're not stereotyping hip hop as just something itself. Instead, he's like, hey, this could actually really work well with the movie. And arguably, Travis Scott, I think that track, is great when it's incorporated into the film.
Well, he pulled a good old Amazing Spider-Man 2, which I don't care too much for the plot of Amazing Spider-Man 2, but the soundtrack, there's a lot there that I like. Mm-hmm. And Hans Zimmer actually worked on Amazing Spider-Man 2. I forget the guy who, what his name was. I don't even want to. Either way, he helped work on the music in Amazing Spider-Man 2 for the electro scenes.
Oh, yeah.
And
the dubstep-ish stuff.
Yeah, well, right. And what is this? Kendrick Lamar?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Was that his name? Oh, no, it was Pharrell Williams. That's what I thought it was, but I wanted to make sure.
Really?
Pharrell Williams was working with Hans Zimmer for Amazing Spider-Man 2 for the electro soundtrack.
I didn't know that.
Where you started to get those bass and whatnot. And I think the reason is for people like Hans Zimmer, or like the composer for this film, which is Ludwig Göransson, which we'll talk about him in a second. But for people like Hans Zimmer, right, they're used to the traditional orchestral sounds, for where you're using your drums, you're using these, maybe even synthesizers for that instance. But when it comes to modern sounds that people in 2020 are listening to, that dubstep style and electronic sound, I can see why people might go to different modern artists to see their twist on what soundtrack you're already developing with the film, which is what happened in a movie like Amazing Spider-Man 2. Hans Zimmer is doing the general soundtrack. Right. Pharrell Williams comes in and puts that modern twist in it with the style that he understands. Mm-hmm. And in Tenet, Ludwig Göransson, forgive me if you're watching this, Ludwig. Forgive me. Thank you, first of all. Forgive me.
If we've got Ludwig, Nolan, and the other guy, Hoyt,
they must be sitting together eating popcorn. They're like, guys, it's Brandon, Joseph. Hurry up! Did you hear? I'm sorry, all of you. They're probably all steaming mad right now. They're like, these guys, they don't understand. They just don't get it. They have too little brains. Ludwig, if that's how you pronounce it, also did the score for The Mandalorian.
Oh, interesting.
And have you seen The Mandalorian?
I've only seen part of the first episode, so no, not really.
It's an interesting soundtrack because it mixes a Western styled music with that of like modern technology too, like Star Wars.
Interesting.
And Ludwig Göransson did that soundtrack, and he also did Tenet. And a lot of Tenet's soundtrack, I was listening a little bit earlier, it does implement that bass and whatnot. And I think same thing like Hans Zimmer did with Amazing Spider-Man 2. He probably got Travis Scott to work on those lyrical songs.
Right.
To put that modern take on it and working with one another to give it that proper sound.
Yeah. No, it's a really good job. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets nominated for an award.
I liked it. I liked it a lot. You don't always remember the soundtracks too, because like even in Avengers films, like Thor and whatnot, what are you talking about? I don't know what that soundtrack is.
The Captain America one was pretty good. That intro.
Was it?
Yeah. Well,
fun
fact.
Maybe I'm not as deep.
While I remember, apparently Jamie Foxx's Electro is coming back for the third Spider-Man film.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't want to get off topic, but yeah, that is crazy, isn't it?
It's definitely foreboding of a multiverse type thing.
It's definitely crazy, I'll tell you.
Anyway,
I don't know how to feel. Anyway,
we should say
sorry. We can talk about that.
We'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that for another one
or something like that.
Yeah, we'll go see Black Widow, and out of nowhere, I'll randomly say, "Electro's coming back." Electro.
Anyway. Okay, well, we've been going for a while now, so let's wrap it up on just the morals. Sure. I think Nolan always wants to tie it in. Memento is such an awesome film, arguably my favorite Nolan film, and I think it does it really well. I think the only film that's a little ambiguous is Inception, but we'll have to talk about that another time. I think in Tenet, he hands it to you at the end, in 2 lines. When Neil is talking about, and you mentioned it earlier, when Neil is talking about how what's done is done. And that's kind of a thread line through the movie. You hear that a lot when they talk about the grandfather paradox, which I think is really important because that's something that's so applicable to real life. The past is something that can really, haunt us as people. And there's a sense of what's done is done. I have to move past that. And it's so different than most time travel films, like Avengers Endgame, probably one of the more recent ones, where the time travel is trying to fix the past and change it. Whereas this movie, the past is a medium to change the future. And they have to accept that, yes, even though Neil dies, and how hard that is as he's walking away, what's done is done. And I think that's an important moral. And then before I go to you again, let me introduce the second one, which is the last scene of the movie when he kills, I forgot the lady's name, the lady from Mumbai. The Mumbai's woman. He talks about, I just skip my mind. He talks about the bomb that never goes off is the one that has the power to change the world. And it's like the ultimate stab at James Bond, which is such an exhibitionist. And he's saying no. And it's applicable. I mean, there are spies in the real world, and you have no idea what they're doing or what they're preventing. They're dying, and they save the world, and we don't know. And it's such it really grounds the character and really completes his arc, because all through the movie, as we talked about, you see his humility, you see his ability to do things, but not perfectly. And then he's saying, it doesn't matter that it matters that I succeeded. It doesn't matter that people know about it. And those are the actions that truly do change the world. So anyway, thoughts?
There's a couple there, because those are two different ideas, but both of them are true from this film. I'll touch on the first one when it talks about moving forward, and that things that what is. One of my biggest problems with time travel movies like Avengers is that they always get into the paradox for where it doesn't make sense.
Yep.
Back to the Future doesn't make sense. It never will. I'm sorry. It's just the reality. It shouldn't make sense. The only way it ever does make sense is when you enter another dimension. But if you're entering another dimension, then you're not really time traveling. You're time traveling in another dimension.
It's fair.
And it still makes you scratch your head and say, then why couldn't you do the same the other way around? Did you really change anything? No. And that is the point, is that philosophically speaking, you can't change that which is. That which has happened, happens. It doesn't change. And what is. When you look upon, let's say, we don't have the ability to change our past, but there's a lot of people who try to use the present to change the past, as strange as that might sound. And they loathe on the things that have happened rather than putting in things in place for the future that will define what happens in the future. Right? You're doing everything you can to change the past. Well, what this film shows is that even when going into the past, you are fighting quite literally with yourself to bring about that which already was, and it's like literally fighting yourself to end up exactly making things be exactly what it was. Those things did happen. Even when he had Neil's character goes into the room, he's like, we're not alone in here. And he completely brushes it off oh, okay. Well, they weren't alone in there. These things were always going to happen no matter what. And even if it does feel like subjectively you're personally changing things, it always was. And you can't actually change anything. And the bomb, and to get into the one that leads us into the other ideas, is that the bomb that never goes off is the one that actually has the power to make the most change. I think there's a lot of comments you could say when it comes to media and the news these days, and what's going on, how people value certain aspects of what's happening in the world but completely ignore others. Those who are, I'd say those who really are making those changes, if there was, hypothetically, if this was even a possible scenario in the real world, and this was to have happened as it happened in this film, logically, we would never even know it. Yet it still somehow has the biggest impact on our lives. So I guess a moral that you can get out of that is that I guess you cannot base, I suppose, the blessings and the gauge of appreciation on reality and how things are playing out by what you know is occurring, because there's so much that you don't know that was stopped from occurring. It's weird that I'm wording it like that, but that's because that's how the film presents it. A bomb that has the ability to destroy the whole world in a scenario where nobody else knows about it. Nobody's going to walk out and start telling people that was a possibility, because it's going to cause harm to people's minds to think that was a possibility. Yet it was the most impactful thing. So there's a little bit there. And like a Christopher Nolan movie, it makes you think about it a little bit. After leaving the theater, it makes you think about it a little bit and apply it to your own life and ask yourself these questions.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of makes me wonder if there'll be Tenet 2.
I thought that this would have been a really good show as a concept.
Oh, that's true.
Because if you were to... I could imagine it would get exhaustive after a while for people who are watching it, trying to connect those so many different strings. But I do think it would be fascinating if somehow Neil was still a part of the second one even, and that we have an entirely different antagonist going on in there. And, you know, not to get crazy about it, but if like the antagonist is his future self that's making different decisions, if he's having to both fight and you know, it would be crazy. There's so many possibilities with that kind of world.
Yeah.
I'd want it, but I don't think it's going to.
No, and frankly, I don't think it should, because I think Nolan is at his best. I mean, he did the Dark Knight trilogy, which was awesome, but even then, he says he approached it one film at a time, which is, I think,
and even Warner Brothers was excessively wanting it.
Yeah,
that's the thing. And because of the box office, let's not forget the environment in which this film came out.
Yeah, I don't think they'd be greenlighting a sequel, but anyway.
Sadly.
All right, well, I think that puts a nice bow on it. So we will be bringing you a podcast hopefully weekly. If you guys like the show, you can find us on pretty much any podcast medium, Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, and iTunes, I believe. Feel free to go on YouTube and leave a comment. Tell us how you agreed. Tell us how you disagreed. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
If you also think that the other directors of sound and camera and what cinematography are watching, go ahead and leave a comment if you guys are listening right now. Christopher Nolan,
that would be
we
crazy.
Don't hate you. Don't dislike our podcast, please.
No, but yeah. Seriously, if you liked it, give us a like on whatever medium you're listening on. Comment. I believe on iTunes you can leave reviews. You can always feel free to leave a 5-star review. And then
pressure.
Hopefully, as this podcast grows, we can start incorporating you guys into choosing what movies we watch, and the discussion. Maybe have some discussion questions incorporated as well. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Any last words on your end, Brandon?
Tenet was all right. It was a pretty good film. I give it a good 8.5 out of 10.
Oh, we're doing a rating.
I really do like it though. I really do like it. That's my final word. I really like it more than I would other films that might even get a higher score because it's so unique. That's my last thing saying about it.
That's a good point. That's valid.